Hello, and thank you so much for being here with me today for part three of the 2022 astrology forecast. My name is Kristen Avalos, and I will be your guide through this journey of part three. And if you haven't watched part one or two, I will include the links in the description below. Just know that I will do sort of a brief recap into how those two play into what I'm going to be talking about in part three. So if you really just want to watch this one, don't worry, you will be completely fine watching this one and going back and watching the other two. So you don't have to necessarily watch everything in order. If you like this video, thank you so much for liking it, for subscribing to my channel, and for sharing it with your friends. So a little bit about me again, my name is Kristen Avalos. I am a spiritual mindset coach and astrologer. And so as a mindset coach, I believe that personal growth is a path to life purpose. I believe that challenges are a path to your highest potential, and that the choices that you make through your experiences are the ways that you learn more about yourself and that you can continue to grow. And my perspective of astrology is on the evolutionary perspective, where the individual consciousness that each of us has is really a mirror into what is playing out in the outer world, and it does connect to our our past experiences, maybe even past lifetimes, our ancestors' experiences. And so we are continuing to play out these different dynamics in a way that is leading to the creative evolution of the planet and of the entire interplanetary universe. I believe that the truth is you are a sovereign being of light, that you have divinity within you, and you came to this lifetime for a specific purpose. You are here to heal your karma, to make things right, and to evolve into a more conscious and creative being. And if you're here watching this video, then I definitely know that that is true. What you're going to learn in part three, again, I'm going to put it in the bigger perspective of being in the age of Pisces and shifting into the age of Aquarius. We're going to talk about the rebirth and America's Pluto return, which will happen in February. And then I'm going to be talking about the new karmic node eclipse cycle, which will take place on the axes of Taurus and Scorpio. And I believe that astrology is really, it's the art of translating what is going on with these planetary movements, and that by translating and interpreting what is happening, we can actually pick up on the patterns and how those patterns translated into the growth of our humanity. I believe that these astrological patterns are a part of our genetic structure, and that learning about the astrology and about how this works within our own lives is really the way that we can move forward in a way that's going to be for the highest good of all people. So again, I'll go through these quickly. If you have watched all three, then you're familiar with this part, but the higher, bigger perspective is really about being within the age of Pisces and how we're at the end of that time. So this is the threshold of a golden age, as Robert Fitzgerald, an astrologer, says, a golden age of mythical proportions. It's a period of destructive energies because, again, and we'll be talking about Scorpio a lot in this part 3, and Scorpio is transformation. Scorpio is the death rebirth process, the phoenix rising from the ashes. And when you have that near death experience, you don't know what the other side is going to look like. How we got here, he says, is no accident, and where we go from here is up to us. This is a common scenario that reverberates through the prophecy of all religions. And again, Pisces, as we talked about, is this idea of religions and how they shape our cultures and humanity. So Robert says, we are not coming to the end of the world, but of our present cycle of ages. And the fact that you're living through this, it really is something that is quite miraculous, in my opinion, because this is 2,100 years in the making. So the age of Pisces, again, we're talking about religion, spirituality, the arts and creativity, illusion and delusion, and really figuring out what is true and what is not, or even what is a delusion. We're really gaining an understanding of our emotional bodies, and a lot of times this is in the form of drugs or addictions. And this is Pisces also rules, being the ruler of the 12th house, hospitals, prisons, the pharmaceutical industry. So we're not only in the age of Pisces, but we're currently in the era of Pisces that began in 1980 and takes us through the very end of the entire cycle in 2160. So we're kind of seeing this metaphorical battle of good and evil playing out right in front of us. And the question is, can we transmute and transform this energy and move into an era and an age of peace, of global and interplanetary peace? The Astro Twins say, in the coming decade, we will witness the convergence of many cycles, secular and non-secular, ancient and contemporary in orientation. The period is circumscribed by generational astrology, with the outer planets Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto returning to key positions they occupied during pivotal points in American history, echoing watershed events of our past, including the founding of the United States more than 2 centuries ago. So America is at a key role in this. And so we're going to look at where we are today in the bigger scheme of things, and also what was going on in 1776 when America was born. And it's the power of seeing. As astrologer Rick Levine says, as planetary cycles affect the affairs of individuals, so do they inform cultural affairs, the rise and fall of civilizations or empires or countries, and the evolution of ideas and technology. It might as well be the same event with different aged eyes. There is this memory that creates these brush fires that keep coming up again and again. The years 2020 and 2021, said the Astro Twins, are a prelude to major transformations in our social, economic, and political ecologies, a runway preparing us for 2022 and the American Revolution 2.0. And if we want the present to be different, then we have to study the past. past, as Spinoza says. So I will be giving some, as I did in part 1 and 2, we're going to be looking into not only the astrology, but historical events that were taking place at that time, and maybe even looking at our way of seeing it differently this time around, which we can do. We can understand things in a different way, because structural flaws, as we're talking about Scorpio, demand transformation. So again, Pluto entered Capricorn in 2008, will be in that sign until 2024. And we've seen a lot of scandals, a lot of exposure of things that had once been a secret, because Pluto and Scorpio are talking about secrets, wealth, other people's money, and even the shadow side of human nature of greediness, being power hungry. And again, we're seeing that take place in the sign of Capricorn, ruled by the planet Saturn. And we're seeing this happen revolving around Capricornian structures like corporations, banks, academia, big pharma, churches, and just authority figures in general. And again, we just had another wave of resignation. So this clip here was all of the resignations that were popping up in 2020, in the beginning of 2020. And again, recently we had another pretty big names, including Jack Dorsey of Twitter, resigning from his position. The Astro Twins remind us that these Saturnian and Plutonic realms contain vast wealth found both in external resources, but also within the deeper collective archetypes that we have in our psyche. And it's a question of being able to endure this challenge and not fall victim to fake news and groupthink. And again, we see these patterns, this cartoon again of how come we can't get ahead. How many times have you said this, or have you heard these words spoken amongst your family or friends of, it just seems that I can't quite get ahead? And what is the reason behind that? It seems like is it some sort of curse? Well, G. Edward Griffin said, almost all of history is an unbroken trail of one conspiracy after another. Conspiracies are the norm, not the exception. And of course, in the Gemini cycle of eclipses, there have been a lot of conspiracies. And I'll be the first one to admit that I've been diving into each and every one of them. And I think the reason behind that, which is quite rational, is people understand they haven't been given the full truth, and they simply want to find out what's really going on. Because as Fritz Springmeier wrote, the very life and liberty of humanity requires the unmasking of deceptions. Honesty is a necessary ingredient for any society to function successfully. Because remember when I talked about this idea of silent weapons for quiet wars, if a person or a group of persons in a position of power goes and does stuff without full knowledge and consent of the public and uses that knowledge for economic benefit or conquest, it must be understood there is a state of warfare that is going on between that group or persons and the public. And just a reminder that this was a manual that was adopted by the policy committee of the Bilderberg Group in its meeting in Bilderberg started meeting in 1954. So this was right after World War II, at the start of the Cold War. And this manual really was calling for the manipulation of the masses through control, especially of the controlling of their thinking, and diverting their attention away from what was really going on behind the scenes. And Stalin said, America is like a healthy body, and its resistance is threefold: its patriotism, its morality, and its spiritual life. If we can undermine these three areas within, America will collapse. And again, I'm bringing this up, and it sounds maybe a little bit conspiratorial and dark, but we're moving into this revolutionary period. So I just want to give you a little bit of context from the way that I've been looking at it. And I talked in part 2 about this idea of really after the war ended, over the years, things seem to be getting worse and worse for us, not only financially, but health-wise. We're getting sicker and sicker. There's more and more diseases, and mentally we're not doing that well either. And I talked about this idea of a psychic epidemic where mental illness becomes the norm, not the exception. And some of the ways that these tactics, again, secretive tactics, are being used to create that state of psychosis. So again, we're seeing the issues with drugs and alcohol, and especially in America with the opioid epidemic that has really been a problem for a long time. Alcohol issues, brain issues, triggers from different poisons and heavy metals in our bodies and the air that we breathe, and also being exposed to a constant cycle of fear nearly 24/7. And again, and to be clear, I'm not saying that it was Stalin who did all of this, but I'm just saying that this sort of communistic thread was a way that they started to weave into our society, really shifting a lot of things about the way that we live. And as the Astro Twins said, there is no denying it. We are in the middle of a great historical change that we believe will truly start taking shape in 2022. In many ways, the cosmic lineup of 2020 and 2021 are a prelude, a Star Wars sequel for some, a Hunger Games for others, designed to prepare us for shifts in world power, economic systems, weather patterns, and the way we live. And that's why I really did want to set up what was going on in 2020 and 2021 so that you really have a solid foundation for what we're going to be seeing in 2022. And again, I am optimistic. I just want to say that before I start getting into this. I am very optimistic for what is to come, but I just want the way that I've been thinking about it really is being present in each moment and knowing that change doesn't happen quickly all the time. So really being able to be present with what's going on, with that bigger perspective of we are moving through this rebirth process, and it can't be without the challenges to get to that other side. America's first Pluto return. So this was what I have been waiting to talk about since part one. American Revolution 2.0, United We Stand. And that's the question. And if you're watching the video, I have these two pictures side by side, and it's the Patriots from 1776 with, Washington at the helm. And here you can't deny the synchronicity of the fact that we have patriots once again. And that term has been one that has been used constantly even in the past 4 or 5 years. And interestingly enough, in this woman is holding a sign that says exactly kind of what I have been talking about from an astrological perspective. Her sign says the same industry that has half the nation addicted to opioids wants these mandates. And another sign there in the back that says we are not divided. Nothing can stop what's coming. So this is Pluto. This is a Pluto return, which means that this is something that happens once every 250 years. So this is a big time for America to show its maturity, to show what it has learned, or for America to fall apart. And that's the question. So this is America's first Pluto return. Other countries have withgone several Pluto returns. America's birth date is considered July 4th, 1776. So the signing of the Declaration of Independence was what marked the birth of America for that particular chart. And again, looking back at that time, 1776, and the preceding years when the Constitution was created, but the war really was about no taxation without representation, this element of freedom and of sovereignty. And it was also about the idea that natural laws give humanity a certain level of sovereignty and freedom that isn't based on what family you were born into or what your bloodline was, which was very different than the way that England had based its hierarchy. And I liked this line from Dr. John Coleman in Conspirators' Hierarchy. He said, being unsure that future generations would also find the truths to which they bound this nation self-evident, they set about spelling them out. And he's talking about the Constitution here, not the Declaration of Independence. But he said, it seems that they were afraid of a time that might come when the truths they espoused would no longer be self-evident. And I think everyone can see that the Constitution is being tested and challenged during this time. And we're all of a sudden seeing how grateful we should be as a country to even have a constitution and a Bill of Rights, because not all countries have such a thing. And this time period, again, mixing in those Saturn-Uranus squares, which will also still be going on at the time of this Pluto return. This is a social revolution, and it's about patriots against tyranny coming together. And I have on this slide here, the most powerful weapon on earth is the human soul on fire. So you are crossing paths with a momentous occasion. This is from astrologer Michael Luton. And you are here to participate in this revolution, which is a galactic one. Now you are going to have to participate in the momentous change of society. You will have to face certain questions. Does an empire last only as long as one Pluto return transit, roughly 250 years? This is an opportunity where each and every one of us is making a difference through our choices, through what we're doing or not doing, through what we're understanding and not understanding. And these are long lasting historical changes. 1776 marked sovereignty against British rule. It helped establish the world's first constitutional republic of we the people. And it represented a model of the first permanent overthrow of the monarchy. And again, as we've sort of been talking about, and I'll continue a little bit more with this, there has always been this shadow in the background trying to test if that's really possible. Now, I want to talk a little bit here about, I'm going to make a separate video doing a reading for America and America's birth chart. I want to do that before February. So if you're interested in this section, know I'm going to have another video soon about that. But based on America's birth time with that Sibley chart of July 4th, 1776 in Philadelphia, America is a Libra. It has a seventh house, or it's not a Libra, it's a Cancer, but it has a seventh house, which is ruled by, the Libran house. It has a stellium there, which gives it those qualities. It has the Sun, Jupiter, and Venus all in that seventh house. So the seventh house, again, is about harmony. It's about balance. It's about fairness. And it really is bringing in the Enlightenment ideals of reason and refinement and social order, guided by benevolent rationalism. I believe it was Jefferson that said that. And we're talking about justice all the time, whether it's slavery or, fairness with different things. We're always seeming to be talking about justice in America, and that idea of an implicit moral duty to fairness. And again, there's sort of this Libran quality of, here's one of the founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson. Again, he is not a Libra, he is an Aries, but given his life as being a diplomat, a statesman, a lawyer, an architect, a philosopher, and then also the third US president, he really embodies this Libran influence into that fabric of what the Declaration of Independence was really about. And then we also have another founding father, Benjamin Franklin, who was actually a Capricorn, but I think he embodies the US's Aquarius moon. And also America is a Sagittarius, has a Sagittarius ascendant, which is opposed Uranus. And of course, Uranus is about lightning, and Benjamin Franklin, we know, was a scientist, so did a lot of experiments. So this is just a very literal example, I believe, of how he embodies these qualities. Again, he was a printer, he was a librarian, he was a scientist, he was a philosopher, he was a Freemason, and he was spreading knowledge and information through the technology of the time with, of course, his work of the printing press and different publishing, very Sagittarian. So I just wanted to point out those founding father qualities in our country. Now, Ben Franklin had used this quote or said this phrase: war is when the government tells you who the bad guy is. Revolution is when you decide it for yourself. And again, I think we are in a revolutionary point in time in America. Now, another interesting point I want to make is that in America's birth chart, Pluto, where again we're having this return, is in the second house of Capricorn. And there is this idea that was taking place in those early years of America about debt, the question of the country and debt and money. And of course, Capricorn is does talk a lot about the wealth structures, the ways that we make money. And the second house really is about the earning a living. And I'll talk more about this when I talk about the node shift too, because this is another really key thing that is very interesting as it's weaving its way through what's happening. Now, Jefferson was of the mind that debt was not a good thing for a country to have, whereas Alexander Hamilton felt that debt was something that was necessary and could be beneficial to have. Now, from Thomas Jefferson's perspective, he said, the earth belongs to the living, not the dead. The modern theory of the perpetuation of debt has drenched the earth with blood and crushed its inhabitants under burdens ever accumulating. So that's a pretty bold statement from Jefferson that talks about his side of the story. Now, again, G. Edward Griffin, as he was writing about the Federal Reserve System and the entire history of the money system in America, talks, it pretty much is on Jefferson's side with this one. He says, fiat money is the means by which governments obtain instant purchasing power without taxation. But where does that purchasing power come from? Government's fiat purchasing power can be obtained only by subtracting it from somewhere else. It is, in fact, collected from us all through a decline in our purchasing power. Now, again, fiat money is money that has no connection to gold or anything of value. It's when money can be printed without having any connection to something with value. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind here is, well, the decline in purchasing power, which I'm going to talk about in just a minute. And the idea too that the big issue that the colonists had was this idea of no taxation without representation. Yet this idea of fiat money really did become a way that there could be some sort of grip on the people without outright taxing them, if that makes sense. So again, this idea of inflation being a repressive tax. And G. Edward Griffin says, when speaking of deficit spending, it's common to hear the complaint that we are saddling future generations with the bill for what we enjoy today. Why not let those in the future help pay for what will benefit them also? G. Edward Griffin says, don't be deceived. That is a misconception. When money is fiat, as the colonists discovered, every government building, public work, and cannon of war is paid out of current labor and current wealth. These things must be built today with today's labor, and the man who performs that labor must also be paid today. And again, I'm focusing on money here a lot because, of course, Capricorn is very much connected to money. Scorpio is very much connected to, wealth and other people's money. And then, of course, as I talk about the nodes, we're talking about money. So this is just what it's about. So again, let's go back to Pluto entering Capricorn back in 2008. So on November 27th, 2008, here's the news story: day of reckoning on Wall Street. We had the crash of Wall Street. I think it was one of the worst days. They compared it to the Great Depression era of Black Monday. And I had talked in part one about this idea of these boom, bust, and bailout cycles. So here's a political cartoon, if you're just listening. And it's talking about the financial meltdown 1 year later. And Obama, who of course was president at that time, said, "And have you learned your lesson?" He's talking to a Wall Street fat banker. And the banker holding this pile of bags of money says, "Yeah, you'll bail us out every time." So there's the bailout of the banks around that time. Now, what was happening to we the people? There was the Great Recession in 2008, where the housing bubble burst. And while the banks were getting bailed out, many people were losing and foreclosing on their homes. So losing their homes, and then the banks are then taking back the homes after they got bailed out. Now, Pluto in America's second house of Capricorn, we're facing that shadow around money and possessions, greed and power, secrets and manipulation. And of course, around 2008, when this was happening, Occupy Wall Street became a thing. And this protester here has the sign, "Dear 1%, we fell asleep for a while, just woke up. Sincerely, the 99%. And G. Edward Griffin says, and this was written obviously before 2008, but again, because it's a cycle that keeps happening again, we know the pattern. He said, "The bank had done precisely what Hamilton had advocated: unite the interest and the credit of rich individuals with those of the state." And what is that? When that happens, that's called a plutocracy. And again, the synchronicity, you can't make this up. Plutocracy, government by the wealthy, a country or society governed by the wealthy, or an elite or ruling class of people whose power derives from their wealth. Now, the Astro Twins say, in this cosmic unfolding, which will extend through 2022 and accelerate into 2024, dynamical and mathematical forces will likely compound overlooked stress points in the economy. These could include municipal bond downturns, unavailable shipping containers, declining real estate values, and eventually unfunded government liabilities, plus a wave of sovereign, quote unquote, bad actors taking full advantage of the dystopic atmosphere. Again, not to scare you, but just to understand, we're going through a necessary time period, and take it day by day, and you'll be okay. Some key dates to keep in mind. So Pluto went direct on October 6th of 2021 at 24 degrees Capricorn. It will reach an exact return point at 27 degrees on February 20th of 2022. It's going to happen again because of retrogrades on July 11th and again on December 28th. So just reminding you that this isn't going to happen in February, be over and be done with. It's going to happen. We've seen it building up to this point, and we're going to see it continue for the rest of the year and into next year even. On top of that, Saturn and Uranus are going to be square on the first Pluto return in February. So expect things to be pretty hairy at this time. Power being unlocked, abused, taken, and ultimately relinquished, as astrologer David Odyssey says. And I agree with that. So just getting started, here are some of the things. We have the Pandora papers. So again, I'm looking at the time when Pluto went direct in October, and at the time of recording on, it's December 9th, 2021, we have a lot still going on with mandates. We have the leak of the Pandora papers, which again ties to the sort of 1% elite individuals of how they were using different tax havens and really hiding their wealth so that it wouldn't have to be taxed. So that story came out on October 8th. And then we have the Maxwell trial and with Epstein, and what are we finding about how this trial relates to wealth, money, and power. So we're going to be seeing more of those types of stories unfolding in the year ahead. I think it will get worse before it gets better. Dr. John Coleman says, we have been brainwashed into believing that communism is the greatest danger we Americans are facing. This is simply not so. The greatest danger arises from the mass of traitors in our midst. Our Constitution warns us to be watchful of the enemy within our gates. These enemies are the servants of the Committee of 300, who occupy high positions within our governmental structure. Again, Capricorn, Pluto in Capricorn. The United States is where we must begin our fight to turn back the tide threatening to engulf us, and where we must meet and defeat these internal conspirators. So mind you, Dr. John Coleman is actually, he was part of British intelligence. He's not even America. But the Committee of 300, which he speaks about in his book, is talking about how this group of elite individuals working together, this cabal or what you will, doesn't really have ties to any one particular country. They are above, they at least see themselves as being above an individual country, and they're working towards something that is more global in nature, or that transcends those borders of a nation. And I do recommend, if you're interested in really getting red pilled, read this book. You can download it for free online, the PDF version, and it's really quite eye-opening. And really, the reason that I bring this up is because all of this connects to the undermining of our freedom. This is a group of individuals that are working for themselves and not we the people. And I do believe the next year we are going to see a lot of unveiling of what this parallel government that has been involved not only in America, but in pretty much had its hand in every country. And it's been undermining all of our freedoms. And so the really interesting thing I think too is, even though this is America's Pluto return and this is happening in America, I think that all countries right now are really fighting for this idea of freedom. And here's just an info image of this committee of 300 power structure. And it really does involve an elite level of military, so secret science, microchipping. They talk about mind manipulation, which has to do with corporations that are considered part of the Committee of 300, like Tavistock, the Rand Corporation. We see Bilderberg here. We see the connection to the drugs trade with the mafia, a connection to banking. Again, you see right here, tax exempt foundations. I could spend a long time going into this, but I included the link of where you could read more about this and dive into this. It's really quite fascinating because it's not conspiracy, it's all very factual, and we see it through the history. And I just end it here with some pictures and liberty and justice for all. And I do believe we will see that at the end of this someday, some way, somehow. And now I want to get into the Taurus Scorpio eclipse cycle, which is really dealing with karmic adjustments that we're making. And of course, I talked in part 1 about Gemini Sagittarius and some of the ways that we've seen how these karmic adjustments have played out in our society. This is an 18-month cycle, and the new cycle kicks off December of 2021 and will last until July of 2023. And again, we're still talking about money. Taurus, ruler of the second house, where America is having its Pluto return. Pluto, ruler of Scorpio. So Scorpio is where the south node point is. Taurus is where the north node is on this eclipse cycle. So we're still bringing in this idea of wealth, money, power, properties, possessions. So Taurus, we're going to be in the next 18 months talking a lot about land, land and property. We're going to be talking about our food and the biotech food industry. So I have here an example of lab grown meat, bioengineered food, because of course, Uranus, the planet of revolution and technology, is also in Taurus. So these points will meet up, which I'll talk about in a minute. Taurus is about work and the earned income that you make through work, which of course we've already been seeing with companies that are not able to find people to work. We have a shift in people's values who are now leaving jobs. There were record numbers of people that resigned in 2021. People's values are changing with remote working. They're wanting more, freedom, flexibility. They're really aligning their self-worth with their work. So they're trying to move into alignment with doing something that feels right. We're talking about our physical material possessions, the resources that we have. In terms of money, we're talking about money, debt. We're hitting this debt ceiling in the United States. We're talking about crypto money, so a new technology of money. We're talking about a quantum financial system, which again is very much connected to Uranus. And we're already seeing this shift into body rights. There's going to be a lot coming up with not only related to the mandates, but this idea of abortion and the body rights of women is all going to be big headline news in the next 18 months from what I'm expecting. And again, Taurus does rule our physical bodies. It also rules the divine feminine. So we'll see more about that. So some key dates to keep in mind with the eclipse cycles in 2022. On April 30th, we'll have a new moon in Taurus, which is a partial solar eclipse that is conjunct Uranus. So expect April to be quite a dynamic month. July 31st, we have Uranus conjunct the true node in Taurus. So again, mark that date on your calendar. On May 15th and 16th, we'll have the full moon in Scorpio, which this is going to be a total lunar eclipse. It will be square Saturn and sextile Pluto. And then on October 25th, we'll have the new moon in Scorpio, which will be a partial solar eclipse. And on November 8th, we'll have a full moon in Taurus, again, a total lunar eclipse, blood moon as you see from the image. Now, the changing of the nodes, like I said, from Gemini to Sagittarius, the energy shift is going to be more emotionally intense and less scattered as we're moving in. Scorpio, of course, is very intense. And with Taurus being an earth sign, will be really more grounded, whereas Sagittarius and Gemini are a lot more scattered. We'll be seeing hidden activities at play. We'll really be trying to find more stability and security. And we're going to be talking about this idea of sharing or even hoarding resources, which we were talking about this at the beginning of 2020, and we're still talking about it as it relates to the supply chains and the inflation and all of that. So expect that to continue. Now, there's a really great article, which I'll link it below, by the astrologer Gary O'Toole about this Taurus Scorpio. He says the North Node points us eagerly forward, but as we do so, the South Node points us back to a past we cannot ignore unless we are to continue to make the same old mistakes. Even if we are fully aware of our mistakes, we are likely to repeat them. Certainly societies and nations are, as ancestral missteps are passed along to their descendants. Again, I don't think it's by any accident that we have the Pluto bubbling up of this underbelly, and then we also have Scorpio being in the South Node point is what we are letting go of, what we're releasing. Now, here's a blast from the past where Gary O'Toole talks about what was happening when the nodes were last at this point, which was April of 2003 until end of December of 2004. So in 2003, the United States invaded Iraq and toppled Saddam Hussein, rooting him out from his hiding place, which hid in Scorpio. The War on Terror was a prime example of Ketu, South Node in Scorpio, wishing to rid the world of terrorists, while Rahu, which is the North Node in Taurus, promotes the need for peace, but with a heavy cost involved. The official US statement has been because of weapons of mass destruction, although there was no evidence of this prior or since, it seems. The motives are always hidden in Scorpio. And many believe that the US had a vested interest in invading Iraq apart from the attempt to root out an axis of evil. The South Node in Scorpio shows the need to get rid of a perceived threat, but also the need for others' hidden resources, including wealth buried underground, such as oil. And again, remember in part 2, I talked about with the Neptune in Pisces and the Jupiter in Pisces, this idea of an invisible perceived threat. So keep that in mind. And another thing too to point out is that the Neptune opposition that I talked about in part 2 happens pretty much right at the same time as the first Pluto return in February. And this I forgot to change it. So there was a Sagittarius total eclipse on December 4th, 2021. And this was the final eclipse of the Gemini Sagittarius cycle. So the end of the 8th month. So again, it's not Taurus, it is Sagittarius. And just a news story again that I think really starts to bring us into this, taking where we were from that 18-month cycle into this new 18-month cycle is that the debt limit, the debt ceiling, and how that's going to start to really be part of the new conversation. And again, as Thomas Jefferson said, the earth belongs to the living, not the dead. The modern theory of the perpetuation of debt has drenched the earth with blood and crushed its inhabitants with burdens ever accumulating. And in Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, which I mentioned, they say when the subject citizens are rendered unable to control their financial affairs, they become totally enslaved, a source of cheap labor. And of course, again, on December 2nd, 2021, so right around the time of that Sagittarius total eclipse, we literally have a conversation talking about slave labor. So certain companies accused of slave labor for using Chinese cotton, and they're using basically slave labor. So even though Silent Weapons, and I'm quoting Thomas Jefferson, I wanted to illustrate how these are not topics that are dated. We're seeing them again right in front of our eyes. Now, with the nodes conjunct Uranus, which I said will be happening in July, we're also, I believe, going to be talking about eugenics, bloodlines, and the transhumanist connections. So here's some articles about Bill Gates's ties to eugenics. Just reading briefly, the article title is Eugenics and Population Control as Dominant Ideologies of the Elite. It says, it is important to understand that the goals and beliefs of the eugenicists never went away. In fact, they have been conducting eugenics operations on the public in the West since World War II. And then another article, again, as I talked about, when Bill Gates was interviewed by PBS and was asked about his connections to Jeffrey Epstein. It's a really awkward interview. So if you haven't seen that, it's kind of like he's really uncomfortable. And if you have done some research that you know about Epstein actually does have connections to the science community. Basically, as Gary O'Toole says, we are now fully engaged in a global and galactic war. This is a racial war of what we perceive as good and evil and good against evil. But I believe it will be a fight over the supremacy of bloodlines. And again, we're seeing the genetics conversation very much, and it will continue. So keep all of that in mind. Thank you so much for being here, for watching this. I just want to remind you that the most powerful weapon on earth is the human soul on fire. So I know this is a lot, and I do hope to maybe do a separate video for America's Pluto return and do a little bit more in depth with some of the key topics, such as, you know, cryptocurrencies and different things like that, just in terms of tying into more of the history of it. So that's something that I might put out later. Just reminding you that I do life purpose astrology readings, where I will help you to explore your personality from the level of the soul, where I'll help you to understand your mission, your gifts, and your talents in this lifetime, and how you can address and overcome obstacles related to karma and unconscious blocks, so that you're really able to step up in to your highest potential at this time where each one of us is needed. This is a 45-minute recorded audio, so I will record it for you and send it to you, and then you have the opportunity to have a free 30-minute follow-up call with me afterwards, where you can ask questions or get clarification. I'm offering a webinar special. Thank you so much for being here with me and watching these videos. So $99 is the special. You can reach out to me at KristenAvalos.com, and be sure to check your junk mail. I will respond no more than 24 hours typically. So if you don't hear back from me, make sure and check your email, your junk folder. And I also offer a free 45-minute discovery call session. I have a one-on-one signature coaching program helping you to reclaim your power, your passion, and your purpose. So if you're interested in learning more about working with me one-on-one through doing some spiritual mindset coaching, click on the link below. And again, I'll put my email address. I didn't include it in these slides. I will include that below as well, so you can reach out about getting an astrology reading, and I'll be in touch with you that way. So thank you once again. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you liking this video. I appreciate you subscribing to my channel, sharing this video with your friends and family that you think would be interested, and of course, hearing your comments and receiving your emails. I am very appreciative of your feedback, or even letting me know what I can do better, or other videos that you'd be interested in. So thank you, and I will see you next time. Bye.